And we are rolling today on a Wednesday. It's a beautiful day, and I'm here with Stephanie Nicholson. Thank you for being here today, Stephanie. You are originally from where? I don't even know.
I was born in Birmingham, Alabama, and I lived there till I was 12. And then we moved to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I went to high school there. And then I moved back to Alabama and went to Auburn and lived in Auburn for 10 years. And then to Atlanta, and then here to Thomasville. So.
Now, how did you end up in Thomasville?
My husband, I met him in Atlanta, but he had started a company here with his dad in Thomasville, and he lived here, and I was up there, and I was a teacher, so it was easy for me to move, easier for me to do that than it was for him. So
I love Birmingham. I have lots of family that still live there, so I know y'all are listening. Thank you for listening to your cousin. But I would always go up there and stay in the summers, and I just love everything about Birmingham because it's not so big like Atlanta, but you just feel comfortable there, and then you've got the beautiful mountains and just the rocks and streams. It's just such a beautiful place.
It's very pretty. We still have family there, too.
Now, I know that you are like me. You have a senior in high school. And that's Max.
Mm-hmm.
How has the senior year been going?
It's different, but we're dealing. I think it's a little bit better than it was for the seniors last year because it kind of blindsided them. At least these guys kind of came into it knowing that things were going to be a little whack. Right?
Yeah.
So he's doing well. He is working a lot, and he's actually gone virtual for the second half of the year because he was doing tech classes, and now he's just taking some from Scholars Academy online.
And is he your football player?
He is not.
Okay, well, good. Then we can move on and talk about, his name is Beck, your second son. So tell me a little bit about him.
He is 15, and he is the football player. He eats, breathes, and sleeps football. That's his dream, and he's enjoying it tremendously. He has a great team and a great coach, and he's really excited about the next few years.
Are your children Auburn fans since that's where you went to school?
Sadly, no. They started out kind of half and half, and then Max is still kind of a fence sitter, but in the battle of the grandparents trying to term them, Beck was won over by the UGA side of the family, and so during the Auburn-Kentucky game this year, he went and got a Kentucky sweatshirt to wear.
Ooh.
So, yeah, he's not.
Yeah. And Auburn has a new coach, isn't that correct?
We do.
I thought I'd kept up with football enough to know that. So.
We do. We shall see.
Yes, well, it's, I'm a Florida State fan. That's where my husband and I went, and man, it's not pretty right now. So with all the COVID stuff, it did not bother me to miss a football game. I had no problem with it at this point, so maybe it'll get better, I hope.
We all have those years.
Yes, we do. Well, you and I are here to talk today because you also have a third son, Hamp, and Hamp is in heaven. I can remember when the events occurred during your life where Hamp died, and I know that's going to be part of your story today. I know that happened. I can just vividly remember that being during the week of Easter.
It was Palm Sunday, actually.
Let's go ahead and just talk a little bit about Hamp and what happened and just how God's worked in your family's life since those events occurred.
Okay, well, I think what I wanted to start with saying is that it's interesting that your focus of your podcast is about stories, because when I started thinking about my story, you grow up in church and everyone's like, what's your story? What's your testimony? And I was always like, I don't have one. Nothing was like huge that you could think of that was something that I had, a testimony to give. And I thought that for a very long time until the day that we lost Hamp. There was an accident in our neighborhood. He was playing, and he was in the hospital for a few days, and then we lost him. So looking back after that day, it was interesting to me that hindsight is very cool, actually, because up until that point, I hadn't seen some of the things that had been in my life that were obviously there for a reason that I couldn't put the pieces together yet. And when I started to look back, I realized that there were other people's stories that had affected me and how I handled my story. First and foremost was, and it was years before, 10 years or so before, there's a girl who, her name is Rachel King, and she lost her 4-year-old in a car accident. And when she did, she started blogging. And I wasn't a blog reader. It wasn't something that I did, but it was introduced to me by a friend, and I was obsessed with reading her blog. And it was brutal. I mean, just the anguish and the anger and the just the sadness and the grief that she poured out into her blog, but she always managed to bring it back around in the end to her faith and how she knew that, even in this awfulness, that it was going to be okay. And I always thought that was just amazing, that could happen to you, the thing that you as a mom can't fathom.
Right.
And to be able to continue on in faith like she did was always really amazing to me. And there were a couple of other stories that I followed. One was a personal friend, and another one was just one that I had picked up on Facebook that I followed kind of obsessively, again, strangely, and those played into some decisions that were made during our time in the hospital and some other things. So looking back at those stories, it occurred to me that they were put there in front of me in my path for a reason, and I didn't know it until later, because then I had that to draw back on, thinking, about those things. And I had been thinking about them for a long time, and I didn't know why. And then it was clear why I had those in my life.
It sounds like God was preparing you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely believe that.
As you said, for a parent, the loss of a child or a child going to heaven is the way they like to put it, because they're not lost. You know where they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It really is a parent's worst nightmare.
It is.
I think of, now I have a 21-year-old and I have an 18-year-old. Very similar neighborhood to you. We had a golf cart, and our kids were always out running in the streets. And that was the reason we lived in that neighborhood. I used to live on a very busy street, and we built a house and moved in so that our kids could have a safe place to stay and play. You would never think that would happen. I always say that God knows the day that we're conceived, the day that we're going to die. At the time, Hamp was 8 years old, is that?
Yes.
And he had just turned 8, or January.
January.
So, and the accident happened in April.
Mm-hmm.
When you go back to that day, Stephanie, and even though you had read these blogs, whether you knew it or not, God was preparing a mother's heart and soul. Were you in your home and just somebody come run and get you and say, this has happened? And
Yes, I was not at home. I was taking photos of a friend at Cherokee Lake, and we had just gotten there when I got the phone call to go back home.
when you got that phone call, did you know immediately the gravity of the situation, or did you just think, oh, I'm going to get there, we're going to go to the emergency room? And
no, it was bad, and I knew it was bad. I didn't know how bad, but I knew it was bad.
When you first, did you go immediately to the emergency room? And so you must have driven really fast. And can you even remember?
No.
You just know you got there and got there quickly. We don't have a really big hospital here in Thomasville, so did they know pretty quickly that they were going to have to transfer Hamp to another hospital?
I believe they did, yes. They kept him there for a while, and there were, being in Thomasville, we're extremely blessed with just a small town situation. So I had people around me in the emergency room that worked there that, were taking over and, doing things and helping and taking care of me and trying to take care of him. And, so that was helpful that I had that support that was a comfort.
Yeah.
The support that it wasn't just strangers.
Because I'm sure at that point you're just in such a state of shock that you're just there, but you don't know how you're going to respond or...
Yeah, it's all a blur, yeah.
And I think I remember you telling me, too, that there was a local pediatrician who was there and very comforting. And you're right, in a small town, we have a little bit more, if you want to call it a luxury, at least having people there who can support you and wonderful people who pray. And
Yes, that's a blessing.
yeah. Do you remember how long you guys were actually in Thomasville before you went down to Tallahassee?
Not very long. Maybe an hour and a half, I think.
Did they use the life flight to take him down there, or they took him by ambulance? And then you guys got down to Tallahassee, and I'm sure they immediately got him in the pediatric intensive care unit. How long was it before you guys were actually able to be with him?
I don't even know. It was all such a whirlwind. It wasn't a real long time, but it was a little while.
Were Max and Beck able to be down there with y'all, or were they staying in Thomasville? And
they were not with us at the time. No, they stayed back here when we went down there, and we were very lucky to have people that took over.
Just kind of took over and took them, because let's see, this happened in 2017, so if I'm doing the math correctly, Max would have been 14, Beck was 12. Are they 2 years apart?
They're two.
At what point were y'all able to communicate with your boys and just say, hey, this is what's going on? And
I honestly
don't remember.
I don't. There's a lot of it that I don't remember.
I know that was a way, though, for you to be able to just get through it, is to protect you as a mom. Were you guys even able to leave the hospital while Hamp was there? Did y'all stay there that whole...
No, we never left. Yeah.
Never left. Did friends come down there to help y'all and just kind of sit with y'all? And
Absolutely. That is one of the ways that God did work through this whole story, that he's just woven throughout the whole thing. But when we moved here 19 years ago, we joined First Methodist Church, and that church family has been a huge part of our lives the entire time. And they're not just people that we see on Sunday morning, they're people we do our life with every day. And our kids are friends, and we're friends, and we do things together. And when all this happened, we were just immediately surrounded with people, and I couldn't even begin to make a list of the people. I had to write thank you notes, and I still am afraid that I didn't, get everyone on the list, and it was a huge list. But just from the people who never left the hospital, from the hand holders to the gatekeepers, veritable army of people who were at my house 24/7 for weeks, organizing food and making sure the laundry was done and making sure there were enough trash cans there, for goodness sakes. I mean, people thought of things that, that you never would have thought of.
Yeah.
The people that sat with me on my porch and listened to me plan the craziest celebration of life they'd ever heard of in their lives and pulled it off to perfection, even though they thought it was nuts. We were just surrounded by people, that the medical people who we talked about were at the hospital here with me, stayed with me the whole time and translated,
Wow.
But everyone that was around us was put there intentionally by God. And every one of them was given us a gift from God that they used to help us, whether it was being organized or writing songs. They all had something that they used to help us, and it was amazing.
That's what the body of Christ is really all about. I think sometimes when people are a little bit hesitant to get involved in a church, because I've heard that story before. I don't want to go to church on Sundays. Like you said, it's about doing life with people, and it's all of us are going to encounter those difficult times when we need people around us. We need people to help us in our time of need. It's just so encouraging to know that you had friends who came along beside y'all.
Yeah, I think doing life together with those same people allows them to, and you, to know that none of us are perfect and we all have our stuff, and that's right. What they're there for, is to back you up and help you and be there for you.
Yeah. At what point did y'all know that Hamp was not going to be healed this side of heaven?
A few days in.
Did the doctors in Tallahassee just sit down with y'all and just say, look, this is what we're dealing with? And
yes, that's where what I was saying about our friends who are physicians were a tremendous help, because they were helpful in translating what they were really saying.
Right.
And also helpful as, taking off the doctor hat and putting on the mama hat. And, one of them's sons was one of his best friends, and it was very hard on her, emotionally, but she was doing everything she could to help me understand what position we were in and what our choices were.
And looking back over Hamp's obituary, and did you write that, or who did? One of your friends, somebody was able to. It was really beautifully written. I did read that you all were able to be with him and surround him with love when he left this earth and his soul went to heaven. And you did mention that y'all had a wonderful celebration of life service. I remember reading that you all met at the Biscuit Company, which is a great place for celebrations to be held, and balloons were released. And I want to hear just a little bit more about Hamp, because I love that red hair that he had. In reading again about his life, he shared the love of art that you have. So tell me about this little red-headed boy.
Well, the first word I could think of was crazy. Third child, no fear, just, completely full out all the time, ready to go, always in a good mood, always smiling, always happy and laughing, just full of joy, and brought joy to everybody around him. And he, he was kind of a rock star. I mean, it didn't mean that just 8-year-olds knew him. I mean, everybody knew him. I mean, all the older kids, they all knew him. And
Thomasville celebrity.
He was always, people say this all the time, but he was always climbing a tree or a wall or something. Always. He always was eating candy and had a blue mouth or something. Like people tell me that all the time. I remember that. He never always had a blue mouth. But yeah, he was just fun, and he was my buddy because I had the two older ones, and they were in sports, and I had to just drag him everywhere. He just had to go and do whatever we were doing, and so he just hung out with me, and that's what we did. He was just my sidekick, so it was kind of like my best friend.
Yeah. And he played baseball also?
That year was the first year. He had never wanted to play anything. Every time we asked him, he just wanted to go play at the ball field while his brothers were playing. They run around and climb trees or whatever at the Y, and that's what he wanted to do. And so we asked him all the time, "You sure you want to play t-ball? You want to do this?" No, wasn't interested. And that year he had changed his mind, and he was playing t-ball that year. It was his first team ever.
And I think I remember reading that the name of the team was the Pirates.
Mm-hmm.
3 boys. I know that you guys were always busy with different activities, but from what I was reading, again, going back to the art, and of course that intrigues me because I have a daughter who is really artistic, and she will just sit and just draw for hours and hours. And was he like that too? Would he sit and draw for a long time? Or
yeah, he liked to sit and draw and color. He was in after-school art classes with Linda Jo Haythorne, and he absolutely loved that. Just any kind of art activity like that he was always into, and his handwriting was immaculate. He loved to draw. He was just very good at it. So.
And he was a student at Jerger.
Mm-hmm.
How did his class do with what happened to him?
It was hard. It was very hard. It was hard on his teachers. It was hard on his classmates. And that was, going back to the celebration, when I said, they all looked at me like I was insane. But it was, I wanted it to, I could not see a church full of people wearing black, crying, and all those kids be there. That to me was not the right message, if you will. Just I couldn't wrap my brain around that. Mm-hmm. So I wanted it to be focused on them. So there was, we were outside. We had our praise band play, and they were on a flatbed truck. There were hundreds and hundreds of people there. There were balloons, there was a coloring table, there was just things. The kids were running around the grass, and that was what I had envisioned. That's what I wanted it to be. I didn't want it to be a somber funeral. That I did not want that at all.
Yeah, because of course, in just hearing about his life and the exuberance that he had, he would have been the kid climbing the tree at the biscuit company, and like you said, rolling around in the grass. And what a great memory for those kids to be able to have experienced that, and what a very unselfish thing for you to do.
It made me happy too. That was what I didn't want to be, somber.
Right.
It's depressing, a funeral's depressing, and I didn't want that at all. That's not the message I wanted to send.
When you look back on everything, Stephanie, and you see that up until that time, you didn't necessarily have one of these dramatic testimonies that so many people have, how has your life changed? And when you look back at reading those blogs, how did that prepare you for what you went through?
I think that the reading the blogs and that sort of thing was just something that filed away in the back of my head, that other people have been through this and have come out on the other side. I had 2 sorority sisters in my inner circle of sorority sisters. I was the 3rd within a couple of years that had lost a child, and so they were instrumental in coming to me with their stories and their support, which I think is very helpful in this situation. Like you said earlier, it's your worst nightmare, but you cannot fathom what it's like. And I heard Beth Moore in a study one time say, people always say, I just can't imagine what that's like. And she said, the reason you can't imagine that is because you haven't had to. Because when you have to, he gives you the ability to process it and to handle it, and you've never had to have that, so that's why you can't imagine, and that's true.
It is,
and
yeah.
So having that shared experience support
Mm-hmm.
was instrumental in me, just healing and being able to wrap my brain around it. But how it's changed is interesting because, I said I never had a story. And then all of a sudden, I'm thinking about how other people's stories had affected me. And then it all changed and turned the tables on me. One morning, 2 years ago, when my oldest called me from school crying and said, Mom, Levi was killed on the way to school today. And immediately, that's like a ton of bricks. It the PTSD, you're right back in the moment, and it took me down. And I wanted, your natural reaction is to crawl on the bed and pull the covers over your head and cry and feel sorry for yourself. But interestingly, surprisingly to me, I was automatically compelled that I had to get to the kids at that school, and I had to get to his mama, who was a friend of mine. And I didn't even think it was like I had to do it.
Yeah.
It was a compulsion. I
Yeah.
had to go do it. And so I did. I got in my car and I went to that school and I sat there with those kids, and a lot of them had been in my youth group, and Levi had been a part of my youth group, and I just sat there with them and let them cry on my shoulder and cried with them. And then same thing with his mom. And that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, but it got worse because 2 days later we had another accident, and we lost another little boy in town who was Hamp's age, and I knew his brother and sister because I had taught them, but I did not know him and I did not know his family. They lived 2 doors down from my parents, but I didn't know them. And again, immediately blindsided, of course, because I was already completely just at my end of my emotional strength at that point after Levi, but I had to get to them. And a mutual friend of mine came and got me and took me over there. And there's nothing I can do. There's no words ever that anyone can say that is going to make it better. They're just don't even try. There's not any. I know people want to, but there's just not. Just being there is really all you can do. And for them, all I could do was offer the proof that I'm still standing. I'm still getting up every day, and I can still live my life, and I survived, and I'm okay. And that witness is what I was supposed to be doing. And it kind of, after this, 3 days later, the second thing that I had to do, that came very clear to me that now I had a job, and that was the job that I had to do, and I didn't like it at all. And I certainly didn't ever want anyone to be in this god-awful club. And since then, we've had other people in town more recently that we've had to reach out to, but we do have a good support group, and we are there for each other. Since then, I've met other moms that people have just connected me with that have the same journey, but it keeps happening. God keeps putting people in front of me. I was at the hair salon the other day, and I was sitting waiting, and there was my friend Mary was talking to a girl in her chair, and I could hear them, I couldn't see them, and I realized she was crying, and I started listening to her, and she had just lost her 19-year-old daughter like 2 months earlier. So immediately I'm like, this is not an accident.
That's right. God put you there.
We
yeah.
were both in the same place at the same time for a reason, and so I had to introduce myself and reach out to her, and I have, and we've talked. And 2 days before Christmas, one of my friends from high school lost his teenage boy in a motorcycle accident, and immediately reached out to him as well. And it again, I don't have anything to offer except that there is comfort in knowing somebody gets it.
Yeah.
And so I have to offer it.
Yeah.
Because that's the testimony. The only reason I'm standing here is because God gives me the strength to do that. And I'm not perfect. I can sit here and tell you in the same sentence that there are times when I doubt God exists. And at the exact same time, in the exact same sentence, I can say, but without a doubt, the only reason I'm standing is because He gives me the ability to do that. And it's not of my own asking. I mean, for a while I didn't even talk to Him. Like when you're mad, you don't. And it's not something that I ever asked for. It is not something that I asked for today, but He gives it anyway. And there's no doubt that I stand every day and I'm sitting in this chair on the backs of 1 million people praying for me.
Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah.
Still, 4 years later.
Yes.
I get texts daily, hey, thinking about you today, or just a heart or whatever. And that's where the strength comes from. It is not from me.
Yeah.
It's not of me at all.
There's a scripture in, I think it's 1 Corinthians, that talks about whenever we go through something difficult, that God will indeed use that to comfort others with the same comfort that we were comforted. That's what I'm hearing when I hear you talk about being able to reach out to those parents and just know exactly what they're going through, because you're right, I've never been through that. Does God give you the grace and the supernatural strength to go through it? Absolutely. And I believe that's true with whatever difficulty we go through, that right now we may not need that supernatural strength, but we can't fear what may or may not come our way. We just have to trust that if we go through something difficult, God will give us the strength to go through it. The fact that just we as humans can't relate to what other people are going through who have gone through what you've gone through is true. I can't begin to fathom the depth of pain and struggle.
Yeah, I'm glad you can. That no one wants to be in this club. And I don't want to induct anyone into this club, but it happens, and more often than you think. And if I can't, God promises to make good come from bad. And if I can't take this walk through this nightmare of mine and use it for something good for someone else, then what's the point? What's it worth? Then it's nothing. And that can't be.
Yeah. Because our tendency as humans would be to just get in the bed and pull the covers.
You would not believe. Yeah, I mean, that's the only thing you want to do, but you can't.
What about your relationship with God? And there have to have been times, as you said, where you're just so angry you can't even talk with him, and it's kind of like, a little bit of friction with our kids. It ends up helping us grow in our relationship with them if we'll keep pressing forward and moving through. And have you grown to know God in a way that you didn't know him before?
Yeah, I think that it's easier to understand what you were just saying about the fact that he is going to give you the ability to handle things when you've actually been given the ability to handle things. And I don't think that you can actually believe that until you receive that. Did it take me a while to even want to have a conversation? No, yeah. I mean, and there's a lot of questions. I don't understand at all. But it's not for me to understand, and one day I will, but I'm not supposed to understand yet. And hopefully one day I'll get that answer. But I just have to trust that whatever horror, that we've been through, it has to be used for good in some way. And if I don't, he wants to use me for that. And if I don't act on what he wants me to do, then he can't use me. So I have to listen. And sometimes it's, when I say compelled, I mean it's like a boot in the backside. I mean it's not subtle. It's go. Right. And you're backpedaling the whole time, saying I don't want to go. Yeah. Like today, I don't want to go, but I know I'm supposed to go. Yeah. And so if I don't do that, then he can't use the story to help other people. I've noticed that too. When God compels me to do something, even if it seems strange, I can't rest until the time that I do it. So that's always a check in my spirit that I know that this is God that wants me to do this. But people, I don't realize, like just this past week, I had 2 people tell me that they had heard of or knew through someone else a situation where a parent had lost a child, and both of those people had already passed on my information to them because they knew I would have done it anyway. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Yes. I know that people were, passing out on my card, but I would if at any moment that someone felt like, and some people weren't ready, and they don't that's right. Talk about it. Yeah, and I get that, and all I can do is offer. Yeah, and so that's what I do, and like I said again, I have no magic words, and the only thing I can do is just be standing there as proof that you can get through it. Yeah. They talk about the stages of grief. I think that's a little bit of a misnomer because I think we all grieve differently. And I'm not sure that you can say, okay, I've gone through stage 1, now I'm going to move on to stage 2. Yeah, it's not. No, it's messy, isn't it? Everybody grieves differently, and you're right. Some people aren't ready to talk about it or even talk to anyone about it, and that's okay. God, He's with you wherever you are in your grief. Yeah. Would you say that is? I would. My situation is a little bit different from other people. I mean, some people have someone to direct anger at or blame towards, and I don't have that. So I don't really understand that component of the grief. You know, that I don't really have a direction of, you know, it's not anybody's fault, is what I'm saying. And so that I have realized that that adds another level of things that I really don't understand. So I can't help in that area except for just say that, you know, you have to get past that, because it's hurting you more than it's hurting that person or anybody else. That's, you know, the forgiveness thing that comes in, I guess, that I don't think you can heal or move forward without taking care of that piece. And I know that's really hard. You know, the mama bear thing is real.
But it is strange in a way. I don't know if that's the right word to use. Our town is small. I call it a big small town. It strikes me as just incredible that we've had so many children in our town that have died.
Yeah. It's just unbelievable.
It is. I can remember in every single instance when these deaths have occurred, just being one of those people that I may not have known you at the time. I can remember, you know, just that whole week of Hamp's accident, I was just praying for a miracle. And I know that many people were praying for that, and I just want to encourage people to keep praying when they hear, even if it's somebody who's sick. Don't forget that there's power in prayer. Our prayers may not always go the way we would hope. To pray for you and your husband Wes and your boys at that time, I'm sure you could literally feel the strength of those prayers holding you up.
Oh yeah, every day. And to quote Beth Morgan, you were saying about they'll be answered, but maybe not the way that we want them answered. And I was doing a Beth Moore study on Daniel, and she was talking about the fiery furnace, and this is one of those things. This is one of those stories, those things that, I mean, this was many years ago, and it has stuck in my head forever. And I've done a million Bible studies, but I can't quote sentences like this. But she said there are 3 different ways that God can answer your prayer for healing. He can deliver you from the fire and take the fire away completely, or he can deliver you through the fire and you come out on the other side of it, or he can deliver you by the fire and take you home. And that struck me all those years ago. But that was another thing that prepares you for what are you praying for?
Yeah.
And what are the possible outcomes of that, you know?
And that is amazing how you remembered that so vividly from that study, because I'm like you, I've done and taught dozens of Bible studies, and I did the Daniel study, and I remember her talking about not coming out of the fire smelling like fajitas.
That's true.
Of course, I'm such a foodie, but you remembered that. And again, it's amazing how God was just putting those things in your spirit and preparing you for what you would go through.
Mm-hmm. Put it all there. Like, and at the time, you have no idea.
Right.
It was all in looking back that I can see the thread. And, you know, in a few more years, I'll be able to look back and see. And there are a million other stories, incidences, God winks, whatever.
Yeah.
Not coincidences, because I don't
right.
think there are any.
I agree.
That have happened along the way that are just like, you know that was orchestrated for a reason.
That's why it's so important as believers to root and ground yourself in the Word, because the Bible talks about having that firm foundation. And so when the storms come, you still have that firm foundation. It won't be shaken. It's there. And if you don't have that, when things happen, because they will, we live in this fallen world, and when they happen, that firm foundation is something you can still stand on. Stephanie, I am so grateful to you. You are just a lovely person, and thank you so much for sharing. I want to just invite anybody that may want to get in touch with Stephanie. You can reach her through my email, which is Angie@revealedpodcast.org, and you can find me on Instagram @RevealedStory.